So the PolyMaximus white paper has been released, and I tweeted it out if you haven't seen it. It's more or less what I expected, I guess. I do think the contract is a little bit interesting. There were a couple of questions that I had, like how are they going to bid on these HSI auctions? How are they going to use a contract to do that, if they're going to use a contract to do that? And some of that seemed pretty complicated to me, potentially. And it sounds like they answered that question by really, they're having an executor, so an individual, bid on the auctions, and that's fine and good. I think it's a potential value add for people that don't want to necessarily master the system, or don't even want to take the time to bid on HSIs. They could have someone that, you know, theoretically is good at this, that has some idea of what he's doing, place the bids for them, and they can give him their money and he'll invest for them. Along that line of thinking, I gotta say this because it's a real observation that I have. I do feel that the Maximus Poly project is pushing the bounds of what the SEC would allow. The contract itself is, of course, stating no expectation from the work of others, but I do feel like as projects go, there is an expectation from the work of others, and it's strongly implied, if not explicit, that there's expectation from the work of others. And even in their white paper, they kind of explicitly say that there will be HSIs that that will be basically purchased, and that's an expectation right there. I think it's extremely likely that they are going to actually purchase some HSIs, but I think that is a little bit contradictory, and I think, you know, do I actually think the SEC is going to care about PolyMaximus? Probably not. Fortunately, it's a one-time thing. Poly is going to exist, but the actions are taken over probably a couple of weeks, it sounds like, most likely, and then there's going to be no more expectation from the work of others. It's going to be what it is. But I think it's unfortunately a little bit sketchy. I would be a little bit concerned if I was the team behind it, if I was the Maximus team. I wish them the best. I think there's good intentions, and if it doesn't necessarily stop me from, it wouldn't be a reason right now for me to not invest in it. It wouldn't be a reason for me to not want to purchase Poly. Poly, by the way, will be purchased. It'll be one Hedron. We'll give you one Poly. And like I said, there's some advantages. Potentially you could have someone bid on HSIs that probably knows what they're doing. And you don't have to spend the time watching stuff. Someone could do it. That's great. That's cool. And then they're also going to stake the Hedron that is not used to purchase HSIs. Theoretically, some amount of Hedron that is given for Poly will be placed in the ICSA Hedron staking pool, and it will be earning ICSA yield. An advantage for that is that if they have enough Hedron, you know, they're going to have a higher position, and there are bonuses related to, you know, if they end up being a whale, they'll get a 20% bonus. If they're a shark of supply, they'll have a 15% bonus, and a dolphin would be 10. And, you know, if someone has a smaller amount of Hedron, they're not a dolphin, for example, they're not able to get the 15% bonus. Well, a dolphin would be a 10% bonus. They now get that bonus on a smaller input, and that's great. And I think also the Poly gives some potential options that someone wouldn't have if they didn't use Poly. One of those options is that they can now basically sell whenever they want. If they had, let's say, a shark position, they're forced to stake, I think, for 270 days. Maybe the market goes up or whatever, they want to sell some. If they were staked in the Hedron pool, and they're, you know, there's some relatively severe penalties for ending your hedron, your stake, your ICSA contract hedron stake. But now if you have the poly token, you can sell that whenever you want. And, you know, theoretically, the poly token will hold value because the poly is backed by the HSIs. For example, the HSIs are hex stakes that are earning yield and hex every day. They're earning yield and hedron every day. There's a chance also that the PolyMaximus team, that this executor bids on HSIs that have the hedron multiplier. Some of them have a 10x multiplier. There could be some real hedron yield over time for these HSIs, and since the poly is backed by those as every day goes and there's more hex and more hedron, the theoretical value of the poly is, at least if not in dollar value, it's worth more hex and hedron. And then of course the same thing is happening with the hedron that is staked in the ICSA hedron pool, because every day for that there is more ICSA given to that stake, and from that the poly that the people hold is worth more ICSA. And that's great and cool, and I like the optionality that is given through it, through the poly. I think it helps the little guys, and I mean, you can see that the past Maximus projects have done relatively well. I think I also love the fact that we have different contracts, different teams working together. I think that's really cool. I think there's a lot of divisiveness right now, as much as ever, even within the Richard Hart community. There's just, people have their idea of what is good and what isn't, and if anyone disagrees, they don't like it. And it's cool to see projects collaborating together, and I hope this works out really well. I'm not sure yet if I want to, or how much of my hedron I want to give to the poly contract. I'm still thinking through that myself. I hope it all works out well. One interesting other thought that I had, for what it's worth, is that the hedron, the hedron that's staked in the ICSA hedron staking pool is going to be staked, as I understand it, for 15 years. One thought I have on that is it's interesting because it doesn't sound like they're going to compound the ICSA yield from that. It doesn't sound like they're going to pull out the yield partway through and stake it in the ICSA staking pool, for example, which is fine. It's just interesting. And another interesting thing is, while I think that there's, you know, I have relative confidence in hex, and I've placed, you know, you guys have seen, I've placed, a real amount of, I showed you guys, I have a million hex that you guys know about, staked for 15 years using HSI. So I have hex staked clearly for 15 years. But when you stake using the poly contract, if you wanted to hold your poly for 15 years, you are also not only saying that hex is going to be here and be worth something in 15 years, you're also, if you're willing to hold your poly that amount of time, you're also saying that the hedron and ICSA are going to be doing well in 15 years also. And the cool thing is you can sell anytime you want. So if something happens, you can get out. But it's interesting that we now have another project related to the hex, which is fine, but the ICSA and hedron projects that are really kind of assuming they're going to work well for 15 years. And I do not currently see a reason why it won't, but I do see a lot of unknowns. And, you know, I see hedron myself and ICSA as algorithmic stablecoins, which is kind of hard for me to explain well, but they're trying to basically be a stablecoin versus the T-share rate and versus hex in various ways. And we've seen some algorithmic stablecoins have done okay, some haven't. And I mean, we will see if the ICSA and Hedron projects work well. I personally think, for whatever it's worth, if they do, if Hedron and ICSA, if ICSA specifically stays in parity with Hex, with the definition of what that means, for 15 years, I think ICSA is going to be worth a lot of money. And I've already talked about this, but if Hedron reaches parity, it's out of parity right now. It's not a stable coin versus Hex in the way that ICSA is. Then I think Hedron has a massive potential price increase. I've said this a lot. I love Hedron. I love ICSA. I think they're trying to do good things. I think they're risky. I think they have a lot of upside, but there's more risk with them. And it's interesting seeing the PolyMaximus contract based on the assumption that basically the ICSA and Hedron projects are going to do well for 15 years. And that's all good. These are just thoughts that I have. And I think it's overall, I think it's a great thing. But I'm trying to be as realistic as I can. That's why I'm talking about the SEC. That's why I'm saying, 15 years is kind of a long time. I mean, in crypto terms, that's a very long time. Bitcoin is not 15 years old yet. But those are some of the thoughts off the top of my head concerning the PolyMaximus contract and what we know now, and at least some of the thoughts that I'm thinking through. Anyway, guys, talking to you from my Tundra pickup today. And anyway, thanks for listening. I appreciate all of you. Have a great day.